A year ago, I fell down a rabbit hole of iPod videos, where people add modern features to decades-old MP3 players and start using them again. I found them weirdly comforting, and I wasn't really sure why, but clearly I wasn't the only one. What is it about this 20-year-old piece of tech that has us coming back for more? You could call it a simple retro fad, but I think there's more to it than that. I don't think you can explain why iPods without getting into some bigger questions like, how does our technology shape our culture? How was that different in the past, and where should we try to go in the future? I never meant to actually buy one, but I went a lot further down the rabbit hole than I originally intended, and I did run into some problems along the way.
Shit.
Come with me on a journey of nostalgia, physical media, algorithmic anxiety, and of course, music. Join me as we try to answer, why are people buying iPods again? iPod modding has been a thing for years, but it's really exploded in popularity lately, and I've identified 4 main reasons why. Well, 5 if you count Dankpods. It's mostly just Dankpods, but 4 main reasons why for the purposes of this video. Let's start with our need to pause. Oh, yeah, boy. That's not too shabby now. I fucking love it. It's so much smaller than I thought. Why did I buy this iPod, given that it's a lot more convenient, not to mention cheaper, to just listen to music on your phone? Smartphones are incredible. They're versatile devices able to do stuff that in the past would have required a dozen different tools. And while Apple, Google, and Spotify might push you towards their music streaming subscriptions, you can still put MP3 files on your phone, so why spend money, time, and attention on a secondary, less able device? Listening to music on your phone might be convenient, but you know what's even more convenient? Checking that notification or email or opening social media. That's the funnel you enter into as soon as you pick up your smartphone. And wait, no.
A lot of people ask why a whole meatball chapter in your cookbook, and we say why not.
Sorry, what was I saying? Oh yeah, besides the fact that they're distraction machines, your phone also functions as a sensor, detecting your every move, your every swipe, and all that data is funneled into a vast machinery that aims to predict and manipulate your actions, all at the expense of your time, attention, and mental health. We're all aware of this, we're all upset about this, and yet very little is done to change it, and I'm sure you know why. Big tech corporations earn unfathomable sums of money, and they only need to use a small chunk of it to legally bribe politicians into not passing any meaningful legislation to regulate their behavior. In short, the ultimate goal of the software on your smartphone is to extract value from you. Do you know what the ultimate goal of the software on your iPod is? To play audio files. I think we've reached a tipping point where a lot of people feel the need to get away from their smartphones, and this has led to an increased interest in dumb phones, digital minimalism, and yes, iPods. That's the first reason that iPods are making a comeback. There's a society-wide desire to put a pause on the relentless connectivity of everyday life. Just got this, so let's see if there's any juice in this old thing. Shouldn't do that. We got liftoff. Oh. Now let's see what happens. No battery power remains. Okay, battery's fucked. I knew that already. My replacement battery hasn't arrived yet, nor the dozen other things I need to upgrade the iPod, so I have a bit of time now to think about what music I want to put on this thing. I've got lots of CDs I could rip, but they're all in Sweden in my parents' house, and I live in Ireland, and it would be really silly to travel across countries for something like this. Here's a little phone collection. I don't want to get a dumb phone myself, but if I do feel that urge, I'll start by digging here before buying anything new. Despite my rants, I don't actually think your phone in itself is the problem. The problem is the consumerist forces behind your phone. And if you drop hundreds of dollars on a snazzy new dumb phone, you're kinda sorta feeding that same consumerist beast that turned your smartphone into an attention trap in the first place.
This was actually a decent one. 128 megabytes, but it did work as a USB stick, which was handy. Oh, Jesus. But I believe the mother load is behind these 360 games and these DVDs of Liar Liar. Damn it.
How many records in your record bin? How am I supposed to get my fingers in?
There's a lot of burned CDs in here, so I gotta get rid of them and then figure out which ones are actually important enough for me to want to carry around in my life. So let's get started. My music taste is pretty all over the place, which I probably have my brother to thank for. When I was real young, he worked for a record company, and whenever he'd visit, he'd bring these random promotional use only CDs that were just lying around his office. This is how I got into Gisley, Maximo Park, The Magic Numbers. Oh my god, guys, we can play tic-tac-toe. I thought it was gonna be like a video game tic-tac-toe, but no. And with my tastes all over the place, I never found algorithms that great at recommending me things I would love. Sure, they can find things I might like, but things I love? That usually comes from intentional digging or recommendations from other human beings. But maybe that's not just me. In his book, Filter World, Kyle Shaker describes this as an era of algorithmic culture. These days, most of the art and information we consume is curated by recommendation systems, and the purpose of those systems is not to find you the best or most interesting match, it's to make money. There are obvious signs of this, like Amazon recommending its own brands over the products that they pirate and clone, but it happens in more subtle ways when it comes to culture. When you play a song on Spotify, the platform will automatically queue up more tracks that the algorithm has supposedly handpicked for you based on your unique listening habits. But in 2024, many people noticed that no matter what song they played, Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso would always play next. Quite a coincidence given that Spotify is in part owned by Universal Music Group.
Wait, what even is this song?
But this might not technically be a case of payola, but rather a function of how algorithmic recommendations, just by virtue of how they work, are really boring. They're averaging machines that box us in rather than help us discover, and the result is a cookie-cutter culture. One researcher tried to get Spotify to please recommend a country song made by a woman. They set up an account that only listened to songs by women, and it still took 120 country songs by men before a single woman popped up. Y'all never heard of Dolly Parton?
Hello and welcome to Ireland.
The most compelling part of this book is its vision of the future, as Shaker urges us to become active curators of our own cultural diets. And that's the second reason that iPods are on the come up. To use one, you have to find and collect music that you like, which will probably force you to explore new media and maybe even expand your tastes. Pew 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 pew. Why do we have outer space sound effects? There's a definitely pile, there's a maybe pile, and a lot of thinking I need to do. iPods are part of the trend towards physical media as opposed to streaming. They open the door for a future guided not by corporate algorithms, but by community and curation. But of course, going back to physical media does come with its own challenges. I thought the digitizing process would be a smooth one. Not sure why. 2 gigahertz processor, 2.5 gigabytes of RAM, and more importantly, CD and DVD. There's no Wi-Fi on this old thing, so I guess I'm hoping some of the software that's already on there will help me actually rip the CDs. Let's try 1994 Hit Mix with certified 50 mega hits. I'm sure it's nothing but bangers. And the magic moment. Does anything happen? So I can actually rip them, but only as WAV files and with no metadata. Turns out the web browser is too old to browse the web. Plan B. Oops. Plan B. External CD reader. Plug that into my modern laptop. Modern-ish. And we'll be good to go. Maybe. Yeah, boy, and it's showing up too. I cannot wait for these mega hits.
Sometimes I want to reminisce, sometimes I want to set the past on fire. I exist because you insist, the byproduct of your production. I have no meaning alone. Dig up your records, right on the bones. Wow!
When I got back to Ireland, all the parts had arrived and the real work could begin. Getting the iPod open was a lot harder than I thought, so while I struggle with that, I have a confession to make. I've been down this path before, and last time, it was Game Boys. I grew up with the Game Boy and never really let go of it. In my 20s, I took a notion to start modding them. I learned a lot about it, even bought a few used ones to tinker with, but I never pulled the trigger on the actual modding. One reason why is that this came onto the market. The Analog Pocket offered everything I wanted out of a perfect modded Game Boy, and all without me needing to learn how to solder. So I bought it and used it for a while, but mostly it's been gathering dust. And I think one reason why is that I didn't make this. I didn't work on it myself. I just bought my way into the perfect Game Boy. So while I think it's a cool device, I don't have any personal connection to it.
Shit. Oh my god.
A 2011 study defined the IKEA effect as a cognitive bias we have towards products we've put effort into. They had people assemble IKEA products and then assess their monetary value, with a control group assessing the value without working on assembly. They did this with Lego and origami too, and the results were consistent. People assign a higher value to things that they've worked on. As the study says, labor alone can be sufficient to induce greater liking for the fruits of one's labor. And this is the third aspect of the iPod's renewed appeal, the modding process itself. I was going to put this by the menu button, but my past self is still trying to crack it open, so...
Now we're talking. Alright.
While you can buy a pre-modded iPod, or if you're lucky, find one with the battery still working, using an iPod these days will usually involve a bit of tinkering, which, as the IKEA effect shows, will mentally increase the value of the thing itself. In other words, if you've spent time and effort creating an alternate way to listen to music, you're way more likely to actually use it. And despite how difficult I'm making it look, iPod modding is very accessible, more so than Game Boys, because you don't even need a soldering iron for the most basic mods. Unlike today's Apple products, iPods like this 5th generation model were designed to be repairable, so for people like me who are pretty bad at hardware, this is a great entry-level mod. You get a chance to breathe life into old technology while working with your hands, learning new skills, and maybe gaining a deeper understanding of the everyday tech that surrounds us. You also get to customize it inside and out, which is another way of making it your own. Here you can see me debating for ages whether to go with the yellow or transparent front, and with the iFlash mod you saw me put in earlier, I've pushed the storage up to 256 gigabytes, which I thought should be plenty for my small collection of music, even in high quality format. Of course, the IKEA effect only works if you successfully complete the build, because, as the study says, people ruminate more on tasks that they failed to complete than on those that they successfully completed. It was still an open question at this stage whether I was going to succeed or not. I had some real trouble getting the iPod to connect and restore on my computer, but eventually I did get to this point. But my excitement was short-lived. So there's this open source software called Rockbox that you can install on your iPod, and it lets you play FLAC files, and it has hundreds of custom themes. By all accounts, installing Rockbox is pretty straightforward for a competent person. I I don't know how I messed this up so badly, but my installation didn't just fail, it fully bricked the iPod. And I thought, oh no, I'm gonna have to open it up, take the SD card out, format it, and then start all over. But no, after my botched install, no computer that I've tried has been able to read this brand new 256GB memory card. In the end, I just ordered a replacement card, feeling very stupid about the whole thing. But with the iPod up and running, I could finally load it up with all the CDs from my parents' house and hundreds of episodes of some of my favorite podcasts, and that was it. Job done. Project complete. Now the only remaining question was, would I actually use it? Or was it all just nostalgia?
It's been about a month, so have I actually been using this iPod? Well, the short answer is yes, though I have run into some problems. Firstly, if I leave it alone for a day or so, it just won't switch on, which you'd think means the battery's empty, but no. As soon as you plug it in, it's absolutely fine, the battery's full, and you can go again. I don't know why this happens, but it's extremely annoying, and it definitely stops me from just casually throwing it in my bag and bringing it with me. I assume it's a problem with the battery, but if you have other ideas, please let me know. Secondly, while it closed up fine at the very start, the friction of carrying it around means that it's almost always a little bit popped open. So if I do replace the battery, I might get the thicker back to go with it as well. You can also see that the replacement shell isn't really as high quality as the original. It's already pretty scratched up. Besides the battery thing, these are all nitpicks, because overall, I'm much more likely to listen to music now, which was the whole point. For all its faults, it makes me happy to hold this thing, which is rare for a piece of tech these days. And yeah, sure, a lot of that is probably nostalgia. That's the elephant in the room, isn't it? Are these devices actually good, or do we just look back at them with rose-tinted glasses? The same question holds for old digital cameras that are also having a moment right now. I grew up nostalgic for the film photography of my parents, but I never thought the JPEG artifact littered images of my youth would come back into fashion. But they have, and why shouldn't they? Based on popular media from these past couple of decades, nostalgia now seems more important than ever before. And in their ceaseless search for new marketable objects of nostalgia, the media now do little but devour themselves. Except that's not a new thing, and I can prove it, because that right there is a quote from 1979. In his book, Yearning for Yesterday, sociologist Fred Davis talks about the nostalgia orgy of the 1970s, and he poses the question of why is there so much nostalgia right now? His answer is that nostalgia is a means by which we assuage apprehension of the future by retrieving the worth of the past, and he believes we're extra susceptible to trends of nostalgia when we face untoward historic events and intrusive social change. The popularity in the 1970s of Grease, Happy Days, and other US media romanticizing the 1950s and early 1960s can, by that logic, be understood as a reaction to the Vietnam War, the assassination of national leaders, riots, protests, and the collapse of faith in government that followed from Watergate. It's not difficult to apply the same logic today, with similar crises fueling our obsession with the 80s, 90s, and now, early 2000s. The most popular creator of iPod videos rose to prominence in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's no shortage of wars, terror attacks, and civil unrest to choose from. As for Watergate parallels, the attempted coup in the US in 2021 seems appropriate. Except y'all re-elected Nixon this time. Add to that some wage stagnation, skyrocketing costs of living, impending climate disaster, and, well, is it any wonder that we look towards the past rather than the future? The tools we surround ourselves with are statements about the kind of world we want to live in, and in the case of iPods, the 4 factors we've discussed come together beautifully. In the now, they give us a way to pause, to escape toxic algorithms and be more present, but they also help us imagine a future where music is curated and collected by humans instead of leased back to us via streaming. Then there's the modding aspect. Cracking iPods open and customizing them, even just buying them secondhand, it's all the opposite of how big corporations want us to interact with tech. We all want tech to be repairable, but it benefits them to make it disposable at the expense of our environment and our wallets. And finally, there's our nostalgia for the past. It might sound like a cheap reason to like something, but I think it's good to be nostalgic for the world of tech and the internet at the time when the iPods first came out. That internet was an open frontier, an unincorporated space where we were all just excited to share. I'm still holding on to that, much like I'm holding on to the iPod. That's why I still have a website where I post all my creative work and I don't just spit them onto social feeds. I'm glad I went on this journey, but it should be said that it doesn't have to be an iPod. You can strive for all these ideals in different ways, and ultimately it's just an object, and an imperfect one at that. But the technologies that we use do shape our lives, and I'm sorry to say that going with the default option usually means you're being taken advantage of. Music streaming means that musicians are being taken advantage of, while music is reduced to content. Ultimately, I haven't thought this much about music in a long time, and that's probably the biggest benefit of this little project. I'm paying attention to what goes into my ears, and that feels just as important as making conscious choices about what I eat, read, and believe. So, whether it's an iPod or not, my advice is this: turn the content off and put the music back on.
And so when it seems like there's nowhere to go, the nearest exit may be inside you. The nearest exit. The nearest exit may be inside you. The nearest exit.